The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild commanded attention as soon as it arrived. It's not just one of the most impressive and important games in Nintendo's history, but it's also a landmark moment in innovation and design. But that's not what this video is about. Instead, I want to talk about what's next. Recently, we've learned that Nintendo's next-gen console will be arriving soon, so we have to ask the question, is there a chance for another wow moment comparable to the launch of Breath of the Wild on Nintendo Switch? Could the Switch's successor bring with it a game just as captivating? One that influences how we think and talk about games for years to come, just like Breath of the Wild did? Moments like this don't come around very often, but it's important that we have optimism for the Switch's successor. By its very nature, a successor's goal is to outdo what came before it, and this means that for well over half a decade, the best minds at Nintendo have been working on accomplishing this very feat. Maybe the next 3D Mario will be the showcase game, or maybe it will be a next-gen Mario Kart or Animal Crossing that captivates the gaming world. But I actually think there's potential for two games that we already know about to be that next Breath of the Wild moment, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, the two games I'm referring to are of course Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon Legends ZA. And first, I need to caveat everything here by saying I'm making the assumption that both of these games will have next-gen versions on the Nintendo Switch successor. Part of the reason Breath of the Wild was such a big deal is because it headlined an exciting new generation of Nintendo. If both Prime 4 and Legends ZA end up being current generation games, then I think naturally neither would be quite on the level of Breath of the Wild, no matter how good they are. Part of the magic of Breath of the Wild's release is that its launch lined up with exciting new hardware. It was a huge home console type experience that could also be played in handheld mode on the new hybrid console. That was, at the time, and to be honest still is, completely amazing. And as good as the Breath of the Wild game is at its core, the moment of it all was surely elevated by the innovation and excitement brought by the hardware. When it comes to the Switch's successor, we don't yet know how it's going to innovate, but we should feel pretty good about the chance that it does. Innovation is and has always been key to Nintendo hardware, so if Prime 4 and Legends ZA end up being next-gen or cross-gen titles, they could take advantage of whatever key feature the next console is going to have, and that could help with their overall significance. Maybe the successor will produce a graphical output that looks incredibly good for a handheld, like nothing we've ever seen before. Or maybe it will introduce a groundbreaking new gameplay style, like the Switch's portability, the Nintendo DS's touchscreen, or the Wii's motion controls. At this point, we just don't know. But let's first talk more specifically about Metroid Prime 4. While I'm firmly in the camp that Prime 4 will be headed to the current Nintendo Switch, because that's the platform it was originally announced for, it is possible that now, since we're so late into the generation, we could see Prime 4 as a cross-gen or even next-gen title instead. It's really not like Nintendo to reveal a game and then publicly announce they're restarting development completely, but this is exactly what they did with Metroid Prime 4. According to Nintendo's Shinya Takahashi, Prime 4's development was restarted because it, and I quote, had not reached the standards they seek in a sequel to the Metroid Prime series. So we could take that at face value and assume that the original project was scrapped because Nintendo wasn't pleased with how the game was shaping up. This is really what they make it seem like. But what if there was a deeper reason behind it all? Of course, this is totally speculation, but maybe the original version of Metroid Prime 4 was scrapped because it was just a safe sequel. And maybe, at some point during development, they saw even bigger potential for it, and that's why everything was restarted. I'm sort of thinking along the lines of how that tech demo for Zelda U looked like it could have been a game in the series' traditional style, but when the real Zelda U, or in other words, Breath of the Wild, was revealed, it was something entirely new that captivated us. Maybe Nintendo saw a similar potential in Metroid Prime 4, with it being not just a way to continue the series, but also a title they could use to help lead the charge into the bold new frontier that is next gen. While always intricately designed and detailed, the Metroid Prime games have been historically pretty small. Although the maps are very fleshed out with secrets, hidden passageways, and other interactivity, they are by no means massive. And if you know what you're doing, a player can see everything that these games have to offer fairly quickly. So what if, instead of something on a similar scale to the previous Metroid Prime games, Prime 4 instead takes place on a ginormous, fully explorable planet, or even multiple planets? I'm imagining an almost Skyrim-type open-world game, but one that ditches any RPG elements to retain those same lock-and-key Metroidvania elements that made us fall in love with the Prime series in the first place. These games have always been about exploration, but it's always been at a fairly small scale. What if we got a Metroid Prime game that pushes close to Breath of the Wild in size, but keeps the same intricacy and interactivity of the worlds from Prime 1, 2, and 3? If this was the case, I could see myself spending hours exploring, scanning things for the logbook, and getting fully immersed in the wildlife, plant life, technology, history, and culture of the alien planet or planets the game is set on. Just like Breath of the Wild, that could be a game world to get utterly lost in. Something like this could be Nintendo's own take on the first-person open-world games that we've seen become popular over the years, and it could be an extremely impressive showcase title geared toward the hardcore audience. A showcase title that might be best experienced on next-gen hardware. If we don't see Prime 4 this June announced for the current Nintendo Switch, then we just might have to start considering this pipe dream as a real possibility pretty soon. Another highly anticipated upcoming game that we don't know much about yet is Pokemon Legends ZA. One thing we do know though is that we'll be waiting quite a while for it still. It's set to arrive worldwide at some point in 2025, just like, in all probability, the Nintendo Switch's successor. And based on the wording from the Pokemon Company's official post about the game, we know that it's coming to Nintendo Switch systems, plural. Maybe putting any stock into how this is worded falls into over-analysis territory, but saying Nintendo Switch systems specifically, plus the time frame we're expecting to see the game, leads me to believe one of two things. Either it's coming to Nintendo Switch only, even if the successor has already been announced or released, kind of like how Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon came out for Nintendo 3DS in the fall of 2017, after Nintendo Switch had already hit the market. Or it's a cross-gen title, and the next console happens to retain that Nintendo Switch branding. Nintendo themselves have only so far said that the game is coming to the current Nintendo Switch, but that late release window gives me pause. It could really go either way, and here's hoping we get a little bit of clarity around Legends ZA before this year is up, whether that's at the upcoming June Direct or at a Pokemon Presents sometime this summer. One important detail we know about ZA is that it will retain the Legends moniker. Pokemon Legends Arceus was a bold step for the franchise. It was the first time the series took an action-based approach, featuring real-time aiming and throwing Pokeballs, as well as implementing a dodge roll to help our trainer get out of the way of harmful opposing Pokemon attacks. Another first for the series. What this tells me is that when we see the word Legends in the title of a Pokemon game, we should expect some change to the core of the series. This means that Legends ZA could be equally or possibly more of a bold new step for the world's most popular gaming franchise. If we get nothing revealed later this year from Pokemon, then maybe we can assume that the team is using that extra development time to go all in on creating a couple show-stopping experiences, with Legends ZA and the inevitable Generation 10 likely for the Switch's successor. The Switch generation has been the most successful one ever for the Pokemon franchise, and they are no doubt looking to keep this momentum as Nintendo shifts toward new hardware. So if Legends ZA ends up having a next-gen version, could it be the Breath of the Wild moment that helps get the new console into people's hands at launch? Well, the situation is actually quite similar to Breath of the Wild if you think about it. With Legends ZA potentially being cross-gen, it will still be there on the current Nintendo Switch for the massive audience of Pokemon Pokemon players already there. And it could have a next-gen version at the same time that would no doubt be a system seller for the console. It would be just like how Breath of the Wild was the killer app on the new Switch, but was still readily available on Wii U, for those who maybe didn't want to adopt the new console right away, maybe even having bought it years prior specifically for Zelda U. And not to read more into the language again, but some official Nintendo copy does go out of its way to specifically call this game ambitious. Nintendo hardly ever does this. It's kind of like setting expectations before we even see the game, and that's never good. But this confidence, combined with what's looking like a year off from video games for the Pokemon Company in 2024, gives me high hopes that Legends EA could be more than just our next Pokemon game. It could be instead the cross-gen experience that helps bridge fans over to an exciting new piece of Nintendo hardware. Can you imagine a Pokemon game that takes the best from Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet with better visuals, a bigger map, and some exciting new gameplay features? Maybe even simultaneous multiplayer like Union Circle in Gen 9. Something like this could take over the gaming world even more than those previous games did, and create a Breath of the Wild type moment for the Pokemon franchise, especially if it's timed at or near the release of a new console. But what do you think? Do either of these games stand a chance at being Nintendo's next Breath of the Wild moment? Which one are you more excited for? Let me know in the comments below. And maybe it's neither of these games, and something like a 3D Mario is going to be revealed at a Switch successor showcase and shock the world. But I wanted to make this video to discuss the possibility that it really could be one of these games we already know about. One of them could be the game that helps push us forward into the next gen. I mean, it should be noted, we knew about Zelda U for several years prior to Breath of the Wild doing the exact same thing. If you enjoyed the video, then feel free to check out the rest of my channel. My goal is to share the joy of Nintendo games with all the other fans out there. So if you want more Nintendo discussions to help pass the time before the reveal of the next console, you've come to the right place. Thanks as always for watching everyone, and I'll see you all in the next video.